Lisa Wexler wears two very different hats. She hosts a daily talk radio show on WICC every morning from 10 a.m. to noon. And she is the probate judge for Westport and Weston. She's been elected 4 times, both as a Republican and a Democrat. In addition, she's practiced law on Wall Street and in Westport for over 40 years and served on both the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals.
True.
But wait, there's more. Lisa is the author of Secrets of a Jewish Mother, which has been translated into Russian, Chinese, and Japanese. That's right. Oi.
Oi.
Lisa, welcome to...
Wait, is oi Japanese or Yiddish? That's what I want to know.
and it's a British saying, too. So, Lisa, welcome to 06880, the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Dan, really.
I want to start out with the dull stuff.
Okay.
What is a probate judge? What do you do?
Oh, that's a half-an-hour lecture. But essentially, what we do is a little less than half of what we do has to do with when people pass away, where their assets go, and fights over that, and trusts. Probate is if you die and you have certain property, how does it get into somebody else's name? You have to probate a will to find out what the person wanted to be done with that. And so to the extent there are will contests or just generally things go smoothly, all of that goes through our office. But more than half of what we do is mental illness proceedings. We have what people in Westport know as the former Hallbrook, but it's been St. Vincent's. It's now Hartford Health. And I am there several times a week. In fact, I'll be going there this afternoon to do hearings where people, where basically the hospital is saying, you need to stay. And the person says, not so fast, I'd like to get out. Commitments, all kinds of hearings, motions to compel medicine. We also do all the conservatorships and the guardianships and the adoptions, issues around surrogacy and parenting, name changes. There's a whole wide swath of other kinds of family matters and children's matters, including occasionally the removal of parents for abuse or neglect.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
A lot goes on in our little court.
And the little court is right over there in Town Hall.
Yes, room 101.
How do you become a probate judge and what got you there?
Well, becoming a judge, I think, is serendipity because there are 2 ways to become a judge in Connecticut. Only the probate court system is still elected. The other is appointed. So Superior Court, Supreme Court judges, appellate court judges are all appointed via the governor and the legislature. But we are still elected, 54 probate judges. And the way I became a probate judge is I had practiced law in our community for a very long time. I think people knew me. As you had said, I served on various zoning board of appeals, planning and zoning. And the people in the Republican Party here asked me to run. We were having a special election because Judge O'Grady was quite ill with advanced Parkinson's. And so it was for a 1-year term. It was an open seat. And I said yes. I was unaffiliated at the time. Wow. Because as I'm on the radio and I felt that it was appropriate to be unaffiliated. But they said, no, well, you have to be a Republican to be endorsed by the Republicans. I said, okay, that's no problem for me. I have a lot of friends in this town of both political parties, still do.
Memorable cases? What stands out?
You would like this one because you might have even known him. Do you remember Christopher Byron?
Sure.
Okay.
Writer.
That's right. Christopher Byron passed away with a will in which he disinherited his children. He had 3 children. He disinherited all of them, and instead he left half of his money to his brother and half of his money to a woman who was his recent dog walker.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so his eldest daughter, who was a lawyer herself, challenged the will on the ground of undue influence, but specifically on the ground that Mr. Byron was a chronic alcoholic and had something called wet brain and could not, in effect, make a will. And it was a very involved, long trial. It was a fascinating case. There were experts on both sides. And the making of the will was videotaped. And ultimately, I admitted the will for various reasons, including the fact that Mr. Byron had told everybody in his world around him that he didn't want his children to inherit anything because he was very angry with them, Dan, because 3 years prior, he had been admitted against his will to an alcohol rehab facility in Pennsylvania, and he had hitchhiked home, and he had begged his children to pick him up and take him out, and they refused. And so they were estranged for 3 years. And he had told all of his friends, including some people that you probably know in town that testified in that will, in that hearing, that no matter what happened, he didn't want his kids to get the house. And the house was his entire estate. But it was really quite a trial. You would have liked the case.
So what's your role in that? Are you like Judge Judy or?
I am the trial judge. I am the person who has to assess the witnesses in terms of the veracity, credibility, the evidence, all of that.
There's no jury. It's just
No,
you?
there were no juries in probate court. No. And if they didn't like my decision, they could have appealed it, and they would have had what they call a de novo trial in Superior Court, where they would have had to start all over again in Superior Court. But they accepted my decision.
Which was?
To admit the will.
Which means that
the brother got half,
and
the dog walker got half, and the children didn't get anything because I found in reviewing the video. So, for example, Dan, very specifically, he was asked to sign his will and a power of attorney. And he said, no, I'm not signing the power of attorney. I only want to sign the will. This was a man who, yes, he lived on gallons of vodka, no question about it. But to sign a will, the bar is very low. You merely have to know what you're doing when you're doing it in terms of understanding the consequences of the document that you're making. And it was read to him, and he understood it, and he read it out loud on the video. He seemed to know what he was doing. It was a sad case.
Oh,
it's very sad when you disinherit your family.
Are there cases that you have? I mean, everything you talked about, the mental health system, taking kids out of their homes. Are there? Is it all sad? Is it all tough?
You know what, Dan? It's really interesting. I don't think anybody wants to be in probate court for any reason. Think about it. You've lost somebody. You're either recently bereaved. The only happy thing we have are adoptions, and we do flowers and cookies, and we make a whole big deal because we know it's a happy thing. We are a cheerful group of people that try and be very helpful to people in times of distress. And sometimes I sit in the car after a hearing, particularly at the hospital, and I say a prayer of gratefulness and thanks. There, but for the grace of God, go me and my family, particularly when it comes to schizophrenia, which is a grossly misunderstood and very poorly treated disease.
So what have you learned about the human condition as you've done this probate judgeship?
Well, we have a beautiful bubble here in Westport and Weston. That's our communities for probate. And what I have learned is that there is a tremendous gamut and the capacity of people to be unbelievably kind when it comes for caring for people that have extraordinary disabilities, physical maladies, children born that can never and will never be able to feed themselves or take care of themselves in any meaningful way. The parenting among mother and father, it's heroic to behold. So that is something I have learned that I didn't realize or that I didn't fully appreciate. But I've also learned about the flaws in our system, I won't kid you, and the way in which we treat people, particularly people with certain kinds of chronic mental illness, leaves a lot to be desired. There's a lot of room for improvement.
So do you have any advice for people who might one day find themselves in your probate court or any probate court?
Well, I think if you find yourself in any court, remember to be polite and remember to be respectful and courteous. It will get you a lot further. And if you're ever in my court, just tell the truth and you're good.
No, you swear to do that.
That's it. I swear you win. And if you tell me the truth, you're good. I'm a sympathetic person. I try and see exactly where you're coming from. Just don't lie to me. That's what Judge Judy used to say. What did she say? Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I love that one. Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. I'm good.
So that's your afternoons. Your mornings
Yes.
are on the radio.
My joy.
Very, very
My
different.
baby.
How did that come about? How do you become a radio talk show host?
Well, Dan, I was a very unhappy lawyer. I really was. I felt my life was dealing with other people's problems as opposed to being a judge where I feel I can resolve people's problems. as a lawyer, I always felt like I couldn't resolve them. I had to advocate, but I was stuck with clients, and no matter what, they were unhappy, resentments. And I felt like I had been spending too much of my time sort of karmically dealing with the burden of other people's problems that I had not created. I needed a happy place. And I also, like you, I get very stimulated speaking to people and learning from people. And I thought, well, what can I do that will create an excuse for people that I want to talk to me? And I thought, what if I go on the radio? And that's what I did. I went on the radio. I started Lunch with Lisa on Saturday mornings. And within 2 years, I was doing 2 hours a day drive time from 4 to 6. And then when I moved to WICC, I moved to 10 a.m. to noon. 17 and a half years consecutively without a break in 4 different suburban stations.
And you do it when you're on vacation?
I do it. I bring my Comrex with me. Obviously, I take vacations. Everybody needs to recharge batteries. But a lot of times I can do both at the same time.
So who do you talk to? Talk about your talk guests.
So today I spoke with the mayor of Hartford, brand new mayor, and I will be butchering his name. It's Arund, and it's something very musical. It's like Arunamalapan or something. It's
right. It's
really beautiful
Indian
name. Sri Lankan.
Sri Lankan. Okay.
Beautiful. I really had a chance to get to know him for a half hour today. But tomorrow's the Bridgeport election. Being very current here, we don't know who's going to win. I had the opportunity for an interview, a sit down with Mayor Ganim recently. And of course, John Gomes has been on my show a lot. So all the politicians come on. Senator Blumenthal comes on all the time, but also Senator Murphy, Governor Lamont. Those are the politicians. But you know who I interviewed last week that really jazzed me? I interviewed a guy who is an engineer, a chemical engineer who hails from UConn, who has now started and executed with 2 partners the first of its kind in the country in Danbury, chemical engineering plant that takes the most intractable of brown, greasy sludge that can't be broken down that ends up in landfills and has created biodiesel with it. And he's created it on a scale that he can sell it so that it can be used as biodiesel. Like, that was the most exciting conversation in a week. It was.
Did you know anything about it going in? Or?
Only a little bit. I read, you see, like you, and I read 06880 like a religion. I read, and then if I see somebody interesting interviewed in that, then we ask him to come on the show.
Wow.
That's how we do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Other memorable guests?
Well, Gloria Steinem, of course, Maya Angelou, Jane Fonda. Those 3 were very memorable for specific conversations.
Oh, great women.
Unbelievable women, all of them, but Maya Angelou in particular.
Who's your get that you haven't yet gotten?
Julie Andrews.
Oh.
My idol. My complete idol.
Julie Andrews, if you're watching this,
and
let's get
and by
you
the
there.
way, she's coming to Branford, I think, in the fall because she has a good friend, and they're doing some kind of children's community theater. And don't think I'm not on it, but that would be. I've met her in person once at a thing in the Hamptons just to say hello, but I've never had a chance to interview her. But what she gave me as a child, and every single time I watch The Sound of Music or Mary Poppins, unbridled joy and confidence in being alive, just a priceless gift to me.
Oh.
Priceless, really.
So let me ask you the same question about radio that I asked about probate judge. What have you learned from all these 17 and a half years of talking with people?
Well, the mission of my show, which I put out there, is to change the world one conversation at a time. And what I have learned is that there is enormous impact in having people listen to verifiable information, that you really can move the needle. And that's what I'm trying to do. Move the needle towards justice, the word transparency is overused, but I really mean it. Make people be accountable for what they say, take away all the fluff. What are you saying and what are you doing?
Must be tough with politicians who are used to fluff and saying what they want to say, no matter what the question has been asked.
They do. So I go sideways, Dan, like you. I go sideways. I try and get to know them as a person and mean it and take interest in them as a person and their family sideways. And then maybe some of the barriers can be let down.
So WICC is Bridgeport-based station.
Yes, it is. The stick is in Bridgeport off the Sound.
And Westport comes up from time to time on your show, I know.
Oh, no, all the time. Oh, yes.
And in what kind? I mean, I know recently with all the charges of racism and anti-Semitism.
Oh, yeah, I spoke about that, sure. I interviewed Andrew Goldman. Is it Goldman or Goldberg? That gentleman who spoke in Newsweek. I interviewed him on the show, yes.
What's sort of not the reputation, but when you talk about Westport on your show, what's the reaction? What do people think of this town?
You know, Dan, I don't know, because the people likely to call me about those issues are Westporters themselves. I have a lot of Westporters that listen to the show. All I can tell you is that I've lived here since I'm 29 years old. So I'm an ambassador for the town, too. So to the extent they think about Westport, my audience I would think associate me with Westport, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really love this town.
What got you here, and what do you love about it?
What got me here was Longshore, because I thought it was, my husband at the time was working in Manhattan. I wasn't even admitted to practice in Connecticut. I was New York. We were living in Westchester, and I wanted an acre of land or a half acre. I wanted more than I grew up with on Long Island on a postage stamp. And I wanted some elbow room. And we kept looking in northern Westchester. The taxes were insane. But I honestly thought at 64 minutes, is anybody listening, on the rush hour commute, that was too long for Bill. And we took the tour, and he saw Longshore. And he said, wait a minute, I can play golf here for $100 a summer? What? And he said, Lisa, this has got to be our town. He talked me into it. And the other thing was that Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward lived here. And I felt there was something in the water that everybody who ended up living here became a writer. And it was always my secret desire to become a writer, well before I was on the radio. And I thought, maybe something is here about creativity. And I'll be part of it.
Is that true, or is that just a myth? Do you think there really is something?
Don't you think there is? Look at all the creative people here. I mean, there were. I hope there still are.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. Has everybody who lives here thinks Westport has changed? The people,
well, it has changed.
The people who came in 1970 say it's changed, and the people who came in 2015 think it's changed.
Yeah, that's true. Look, this is the way in which I believe the perception is it's changed. The perception is it's more materialistic than it used to be. The perception is that people feel entitled to more material things, and in the way of dealing with each other, that they're a little snappier, less patient maybe than they used to be. But maybe those are individual anecdotal things. I don't really know. I have young friends in town that I adore, and I'm meeting more of them every day. I don't know. Maybe the town will make them for the better. Maybe they come here rushed because they are from a bigger city. They are feeling more stressed, and over time, we have an impact on them. I would like to believe that.
So what has kept you here? I mean, Longshore got you here?
Everything. And I don't play golf, by the way. And neither does Bill anymore, like for thousands of years. The only thing that we love about Longshore is to eat there all the time. That's what we do. I would say what keeps me here, as my daughter always says to me, Mommy, nobody loves their town more than you. Everything about this town keeps me here. The physical beauty, the caring and the commitment to issues. I will say, Dan, I'm seeing a little less of that than I used to. I was very shocked that all of a sudden now we're charging for parking, and there hasn't been this huge hullabaloo in the RTM about it. Years ago, there would be this enormous, like, town-wide thing. But okay, it's not my battle. It is what it is. But so I do think there are certain things that are happening in plain sight that people years ago might have gotten more exercised about. But I think about the big things. Westport always comes through and makes itself known. I'm encouraged by that.
That's good to hear.
Don't you think so?
As you were talking about the controversies, I'm thinking about Long Lots Elementary School.
Yes, exactly.
And, the gardeners versus the
me too.
Parents versus the athletic
people. Are still getting exercised about stuff.
Yeah.
That's very Westport. That's in our tradition.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Your go-to places, go-to restaurants?
Personally,
Yeah.
I don't have any favorite restaurants. I wish I did. I don't. I mean, I don't have any non-favorite. I just
Okay.
don't. My go-to places in Westport, I walk with the dogs a lot. One of my favorite loops is the one behind the library here.
The Riverwalk.
Yes. And just starting all around and going all around. I love that one. But the truth is, I park behind Town Hall. And very often at 5:30, 6 o'clock, a friend and I will take the two little white dogs. And we will just pop in and around the alleys and do a very big loop all around town and feel very nourished and refreshed and stimulated by this little town.
Wow.
Yeah. And I always pass the spot where George Washington stopped by Christ and Holy Trinity Church. Various markers along the way. Yeah, I like this town.
Oh.
I do. I'll tell you what I wish this will be. Probably shouldn't open my mouth. But when I first came to Westport, we allowed dogs on the beach all the time. You remember those years. And then all of a sudden there was this campaign and dogs weren't allowed from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And then the shoulders got bigger on either side. And I still think there's a compromise. And I would like to see us emulate what they do in Cape Cod and Federal Seashore, which is all year long, dogs are allowed before 9 and after dusk.
Well, that's interesting.
And I'm not saying that they need to be maybe where the summertime people are, that it would create some filth. But there are parts of our beach that are not full of that many swimmers. And maybe before 9 and after dusk, we could let the dogs come back to get some relief from the heat. And I don't have swimmers. I have Bichons.
Uh-huh.
But I love seeing the dogs at the beach. Don't you?
That's a very interesting take. Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing dogs now in Stop and Shop and all over the place and where they haven't been before. So.
And they're usually service animals. But, we're having a warmer and warmer climate. I don't know why our dogs have to be deprived of a good swim in the Sound.
There you go. Hidden gem, place that nobody knows about.
You think I'm going to tell you?
Although they will now.
I'm not sure I'm going to tell you. Because then it won't remain hidden because everybody listens to 06880. A hidden gem. Well, it's not so hidden, but it really is a gem where the people wade for trout on Clinton, where it becomes Ford Road in Weston.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great area.
Yeah.
You come around that bend. I always think I'm in Vermont.
Right?
It looks like a Vermont river there.
It's amazing. It's in plain sight, but it's hiding in plain sight, I think. Yeah.
So getting back to your two hats.
Yes.
How do you balance the two parts of your life?
The probate is about public service, which nourishes my soul and my brain. And the radio is my very, very happy place, which gives me an outlet to hear people and to magnify messages that I think need to get out to make it a better world. So it's really all about communication, disseminating information. I do Lisa on the Law once a week on the air, which I do on Monday mornings, where people call in, not so I can give them specific legal advice, but this morning the question was, well, my mother left me her house. Do I have to go through a probate? Well, you know the answer to that. It depends, right? If she left you your house in a joint tenancy on a deed, then it's just a 706 and a release of tax lien. If she left it to you in your will, yes, you have to go through probate. So whatever I'm doing, I'm still communicating.
Yeah. And where does Westport fit in all this? What does Westport do for you professionally and personally? Where does it fit in your life?
I think it's part of my identity now. I really mean that. I think that this town and what I love about this town, Dan, and what I learned really from living in this town is an awful lot about the effectiveness of local political participation, from the RTM up. People's voices have a real impact, and you learn that by speaking up. And Westport is a speak-up town, and I'm a speak-up girl. And so I think we fit well.
There has been recent a lot of the recent talk, people speaking up, has been pretty vindictive. I mean, people are talking about the RTM moderator, about the RTM, about people on commissions and committees in some pretty strong terms.
I know. I've seen on your blog where you've had to stop some conversations for a while and take a pause.
Do you think this would deter people from wanting to go into public service?
Yeah, don't you? Yeah, it already has. I mean, nationwide, we see that. People in private conversations would say, well, how are we going to get anybody good to run for anything when look what they have to go through?
Yeah.
So it takes a certain amount of a thick skin and some courage. But in your core, you have to always be running for the right reason. And if you're running for the right reason, because whatever it is you think you have to say or contribute is something the town needs to hear and be part of, then I think those people will still run.
And what's your core?
Justice, freedom, the good things, American things, justice and freedom. Yeah, that's what gets me up in the morning. The environment, birds. You know what I would like to see? I would like to see Westport begin an initiative to take a look at all of the lights that we control in the evenings and see a way that we can make it kinder for our birds and natural creatures to navigate and migrate. We have been lighting up the dark skies. This, again, a guest educated me. And he is the head of a local group about the dangers, about all the millions and billions of birds that are losing their way on migrations and getting killed, bumping into buildings on the way. So I get educated. And then I write to our local P&Z. And they listen to my radio show and they listen to Leo Smith's podcast with me. And then they invite him to go to a Westport meeting. And lo and behold, they find out what I find out. It isn't me. I don't know anything. He knows it. And then they say, you know what? For new developers who come into town, maybe we can fix this. Maybe we can make this better. And that's how we have impact.
Wow. One light at a time.
One light at a time.
There you go. Great. Anything I should have asked that I didn't?
I don't know if you didn't ask anything, but it is my chance to speak up, and I have to compliment you. I have to say that your 06880, which is really it's a blog-ish, because it really is a journalistic enterprise that also allows people to speak about what they're reading. So you have a hybrid. And I would say that you do a great service to the town. Your blog has become must-reading. I would say the scoops are all coming from 06880, and I want to thank you for that. How many times in the morning do I say, Dan, how'd you get that story? Let's talk about that. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Well, it takes a village. I'm proud to be part of this one, and I'm glad that you, Lisa Wexler, are part of it as well.
I'm very proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. And weekdays, 10 to 12,
on WICC. And, of course, the podcast available anywhere you listen, The Lisa Wexler Show.
There you go. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Dan.